Thanks for joining. My name is Ben Harmon. I'm with Arbor Financial Credit Union. Today, we are going to cover expectations of a financial caregiver. We've already done reporting elder abuse, and we've also done preventing elder abuse fraud in our previous webinars. So if you have not seen them, check out our webinars and on-demand page. This one is great because this really is from just the views of the caregiver and kind of the expectations or legal constraints they're tied in with. So as we jump into it, I do see that we caregiver. So the definition is one who gives the tremendous gift of love and aid to another. It's a symbol of strength and dedication. I think it's very important. I have not yet been a caregiver of my parents yet. However, in my industry of being 13 years in that realm, I've seen a lot of different people at different ages. It's not usually expected. Generally, it's just like, now you need to be a caregiver. So these are great pieces of information to help us kind of make sure that we're prepared for it. So what is a financial caregiver? Well, financial caregivers are people who assist elderly or people who need help managing their funds. This nearly equates to about 44 million Americans acting as caregivers each year. It's a lot. Caregivers may be institutional or professional. However, most caregivers are relatives of some sort. And we'll get into the different types of caregiver agreements in just a few moments. And caregivers often live with or close to the recipient of care. For common sense reasons, obviously, if you're a caregiver that lives 2 hours away from somebody, you might be able to provide some care, but your in-town care is going to be definitely what you're looking for. So if you are going to be a caregiver for someone that's farther away, you might want to contract a caregiver that is from a business that comes in and helps on those day-to-day things, and maybe you're managing mid and long term. And then many of our caregivers do work full-time hours, full-time jobs, and on top of that, they spend 25 hours a week providing care on top of what they have to do for their family and their job and everything else. So it is bearing sometimes, and we'll talk about how to take care of that as well. So important caregiver traits: mental strength. When we think about mental strength, we jump into this because mental strength is required for attentiveness, being observant, money management, clear communication, and organization. If you have someone that's, I don't want to say flighty in a bad word, but kind of all around the place, they might forget certain things, and you want someone that's very precise, to the point, right? The next one is definitely physical strength. We could probably understand why this is important if we're caring for someone elderly and they need help getting out of a chair, going to the bath, things like that, where that physical strength, you can't have someone necessarily take care of you that's in the same age group. Now, we do see aging husbands and wives, and that's different. But when you think about physical strength, you're going to need it for those kinds of situations. The next one is emotional strength. And this is one of the ones that I see to be the most important, because when you think about the person that you're caregiving, right? They're going through an experience in their life they've never done before, neither have I. They're losing some of their privileges or their freedoms, a little bit here and there. And so they get very tight, or they get very protective of those freedoms. And this is where patience and empathy are huge when you're a caregiver. Very huge, that you need to be patient and empathetic. And you got to have that dedication for them. It's not for you, it's for them. And chances are that person you're taking care of took care of you at some point. So you do owe that to them to have that kind of thing. And then lastly, attention to detail. And I know this kind of falls in the mental strength area, but attention to detail is its own, because you have to pay attention. You have to pay attention to changes in the person you're caring's hygiene, the friends, the new friends or family they're hanging out with, their eating habits. Are they doing something they've never done before? Their spending habits. So pay attention to detail and notice outliers or new trends that are happening in the way that that person runs their life. Some of the responsibilities of a financial caregiver, well, we got daily support is going to be one of them. And that comes down to paying bills, check writing, balancing of accounts, and then obviously making deposits, withdrawals. And this might be someone that you drive there, you take them into the bank, they make the deposits, but do keep an eye on it, right? Keep an eye on it. Sometimes elderly people don't know they're being frauded. Sometimes elderly people, the only way they know what's going on with their checking account is by receiving a statement by mail. Well, that means there could have been transactions happening for a full month before they get it. So do have some things that you keep a track of, and maybe even extra copies. Some financial institutions can send 2 copies to different addresses. If you are POA or on the account with your elderly person, you can definitely request those kinds of things to help keep them in the loop. Or I've also seen a lot of younger people that are helping elderly people. The younger person will set up an online banking account so that younger person can easily log on, see what's going on in real time. And then the elderly person still gets their statements, still can do all their banking the way they want. Again, patience and empathy, not removing their responsibilities, but letting them have it. But again, you being the eagle eye on top. Midterm support. So this is like longer. So midterm is probably like monthly, maybe even quarterly. You got managing sources of income. You know, is the person you're carrying, do they only get Social Security? Do they get a pension? Do they have any other benefits coming in? Do you know how to search for those to see, make sure they actually are getting all the benefits? And then filing insurance and benefit claims, whether you're on Medicaid or Medicare, or you have a private insurance company, making sure that these bills are up to date and paid are going to prevent your elderly person from potentially having them reporting on their credit report, right? And even though that people are elderly, you never know when they might need credit. Maybe they had something happen and they need to make alterations to their house, right? They need to make some improvements. So we always got to make sure we have our credit taken care of, and by filing insurance claims, because again, we know if we have a medical bill that doesn't get paid, what happens to it? Eventually, yes, it'll make it to our credit report, and it will have a negative impact. And then long-term saving and investments decisions, and then managing legal matters. Now, when we think about saving and investment decisions, the reason that you want to be involved with this is to make sure that someone isn't making them take something too risky, right? If I'm caregiving for an 85-year-old senior and they have some money, they don't need to get into a return of an investment on a product for like 40%. It's gonna be real risky, right? We might be looking at CDs and annuities, or maybe even a mutual fund at this point. So it is your job to make sure that those kinds of things are taken care of, but be very careful. A caregiver is not the person that mediates with the family, right? A caregiver is a person the family decides, whether it's a relative or family member or an outside contract arrangement, because you can do that. You can either have someone that you know and love comes in and takes care of it, or there's third-party services that they're contractual and they're paid. And a lot of times families, they get, you know, they're never really got along that well because of different political, religious, caregiving examples. So they sometimes will just involve a third party that has no vested interest in what the family cares. They're worried about that person, that elderly person. And really, that is what's most important. So just know, as a caregiver, and you'll see this often if you research it, the caregiver is not the mediator of the family. That sometimes when I've seen families, they don't necessarily get a lawyer, but they go to a mediation service, the same kind of service a divorced couple might go to before they go through the actual legal process or other things. But there's a mediator that is a neutral party, has no vested interest in either side of the party, and will help navigate. I have seen that be successful because once these parties get together, if they have issues, they settle at mediation, and the person that's the caregiver has documentation and all the paperwork to know what they're expected to do. And that's when it comes down to managing the legal matters. If you are documented or created to be a caregiver, especially like the contractual ones, like the third parties that are from outside of your family, it's very easy to give them these requirements, and they follow them. And if you don't follow them, you're breaking the law, and it can fall really into elderly abuse very quickly. But just know, again, caregivers are supposed to care for that person, not mediate the family. And then we see a lot of this happening, and while it does is it makes the person you're caring for suffer, because now they're being torn, because they might be between the siblings, the kids, right? And they love all their kids and they don't know who, and then in their age, maybe they're getting a little forgetful, maybe dementia, you know, there could be all these other things that create, and it actually makes it worse. So the caregiver, their expectation is you are caring for that person. That means if you have to stand up to the brother or the sister because you know in your mind and your heart this is the right way and this is what was discussed, you stand up to them. If you cannot do that, it's time to pass the baton. And this is why a lot of people rely on a third party, right? And it might not be all of it. Maybe there's still a sibling that looks after the accounts, but there's someone that comes day to day, right? Make sure that, and they're generally, you know, registered nurse or nurse practitioner or something along the lines of that. So they're very good at health, and they can help administer the medications or anything like that, give bathing care. So, but your responsibilities are really lie on the financial side and making sure that they have money to outlive their life. So give caregiver best practices. So I like this one because it does have a nice acronym called CARE. So the first one is communicate, involve their charge and family members in decision making. So again, we will involve them, but we are not the mediator. As soon as there's someone that starts getting real upset, we got to try a different angle. Advocacy, right? Promote good spending habits and report suspicious activity. if you see your sibling or someone that's in your family doing something that's shady, if you don't think you could report them, you should pass the baton. Third-party caregivers will not hesitate one bit. If they see their patient, 85-year-old lady, all of a sudden has 15 party store transactions on their account, they will in a heartbeat report that, which is great because it's not a personal attack. You do it on someone, your sibling or family members. But again, there is a role. You are responsible for that person, and that person is depending on you. The issues you have between you and your siblings or you and other family members, that's not for mom or dad. That's for you. But promote good spending habits, right? Generally, older people, they have pretty good spending habits. They do the check register. They're very simplistic in their ways, which is nice, but just promote it. Don't let them get into something that's like too risky, like an investment or a business dealing or something along the lines of that. I also see with advocacy, grandparents helping out nieces and nephews. And if you have the means, you want to give your niece or nephew a little bit of help, that's fine. That's your prerogative. But it's got to be smart and fall within your means. I've had other people give too much money, and then something happened to them, and now they're up the creek, right? They have that. So, and then responsibility, keep records and document all financial activity. I even further say if you have a conversation with a troubling sibling or family member, that you record it. Not necessarily the vocal, but write down the date and time you had the conversation. Talked with Jim, talked to blah, 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 covered this is what we talked about. Just because if all of a sudden it comes up where there's like this fight of two heads, or siblings or family members, the one that has the more documentation, the better records, they're going to win. A lot of times people that are very all over the place and causing issues, they don't really keep good documentation. They're not recording conversations, but this will also help you because if you had the conversation 12 times, you might not remember all the dates and times, but if you have written down, just go back to your book. So look, we talked about this 8 times already. So if it comes down to it and there is a lawyer involved, chances are your documentation will be better than theirs, and obviously your way will win. And we hope that your way is the good-hearted way. And then lastly, ethics. So we spell care, but it is avoiding conflicts of interest. Whenever you're the caregiver, you really want to not even just cross that line, like way on the other side of that line. You want to make sure that anything that your people you care for, they don't do anything that benefits you, right? Like if you're the caregiver, I mean, you might be in charge of the trust or the successor of the will, but just make sure whatever things they want to do, like if your person you're caring for just wants to give you $10,000, and maybe they wholeheartedly are all straight in the head and they just have it and they want to give it to you, it's great. But from an outside party, if all of a sudden mom gives you $10,000 and one of the other family members has a problem with that, and let's say your parents or whoever you're taking for can't really tell them how they feel, like you might get in trouble for that. So be careful that it doesn't self-deal or also is conflict of interest. So self-care, this is the last one, right? Some people say, well, I'm a caregiver. What do I need self-care for? You do. Because as I said in the beginning, most people that are a caregiver, they have full-time jobs. And on top of that, they're spending 25 hours in additional time with that person. And they might even have their own family, their own job. So self-care is important because if you're damaging yourself, you're not gonna be able to give your full to that person you're taking care of. So you got to take care of yourself. You got to be 100% so you can give them as much patience, empathy, understanding, all those things that require with someone coming of age. So employment, self-care, right? Caregiving can get in the way of your own job. Don't let it get you fired. If you are realizing that your job is just not working, you have to reach out, ask for help. A lot of the times when we see caregivers, they're I'm not saying ashamed. They think they got it. No, there's so many support places. There's so many nonprofits in town that can help you out with free support or additional care, so you don't screw yourself over on your job. Financial self-care. Over 50% of the caregivers have reported using their own savings and retirement to pay for care. And that's because sometimes when people are getting elderly, they didn't think about, they relied a lot on Social Security and maybe a pension, and then something dried up, right? Or their care that they require is way more expensive than they can afford, and Medicaid or Medicare isn't covering it. So there are a lot of people that do into that. And you want to make sure that, if you have the means, you can help. I mean, I'm not saying I wouldn't stroke a check for my mom any day of the week, but I can't put myself in the poorhouse because of it. There are other ways. There are government things out there that can help give a little bit more. But again, you want to make sure when you dip into your own financial stuff that either A, it's out of the kindness of your heart, or B, there's really no other way. Emotional self-care. get some people that get some big pride-isms, or they're the local sibling and all the other siblings moved away and live all around the United States, the world. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Again, there's a lot of places in town that will help you for free, help you provide different places, different avenues. You're not alone. Don't let it eat you up or bother you. And then last one I cannot say enough is the legal self-care. So again, documentation, maintain records, and documentation. And your job from a legal standpoint is really like the main one for the legal standpoint is if there's a will or a trust, right? If there's a will or a trust, you are as a caregiver kind of responsible for making sure it's carried out that way. Now, if someone does something wrong with it, the law will reprimand, but it's your job to make sure it's read properly, that it's given, that everybody kind of understands it when it comes down to the wills and trusts. So key takeaways: not everyone is suited for financial caregiving. It's okay. You're just not in the capacity. If you are, great. If you decide you want to do it, you can't. Don't let that person you're caring for suffer. Be proactive. Stand up to it if you can. Caregiving responsibilities can be daily and long-term. A lot of the times we see people on average caring for someone for 4 years. So that's one. And then also 80% of these providers care for more than one person. So, I mean, they really are, it could easily be a full-time job. There are different types of caregiving. Again, there's the one that, I'm your son, I take care of you because of that responsibility. There's contractual, and then there's also state appointed. So there's really 3 different ones. It doesn't really get to the state appointed, that one. Generally, with families are having issues, a contracted caregiver, just a company, solves a lot of it, because again, that person does not care about you guys. They care about mom or dad or whoever that elderly person is. And lastly, caregivers need time for themselves. If they go from the job to caregiving to sleep to the job to caregiving, they will lose it. And again, why it's important is because if you're not 100%, you cannot give 100%. And elderly people need that more than anything.